Welcome back to A Wild Approach. My name is Macy, and this is going to be a very foggy garden tour. The video footage was recorded back in August, early August, and the partridge pea was just absolutely gorgeous at this time. And most of the purple coneflower was kind of starting to fade, and so the partridge pea and the passion flower vine were really just taking over the show. So I wanted to talk about wildlife gardening, and I wanted to talk about some stigmas that I guess get talked about in certain ways, and I'm probably going to deviate from a lot of people in this video. A lot of people kind of talk negatively about a messy garden and a garden that's less formal, and I just disagree with this. I think that you can have as formal of a garden or as messy of a garden as you want. Of course, if you live in an HOA, maybe this isn't physically possible because they might fine you and it might cost you money that you don't have. And so if you have to have yeah, it's really fogging up the camera here. If you have to live in an HOA, or if you already live in one and you have to follow very strict rules where you live, no shame, you gotta do what you gotta do. I totally understand if you can't have a messy garden. And I also totally understand if you just don't like it and it's not your aesthetic. Totally fine. Where I get frustrated, though, is this messaging that I see over and over again in the native plant community that basically says, a native garden doesn't have to be messy. And in my head, I'm just like, well, of course it doesn't have to be messy, but why don't we embrace the messy? Because I've always been drawn to a messy garden, even before I did native plant gardening. So it's not even about the fact that the plants are native, whether or not a garden is messy. That can be, and the term messy is, I think a lot of people see it in a negative light, and I just don't. I mean, messy in your house, like inside your house, would probably be negative, right? It might mean that, you just can't get to the cleaning, or you might have too much clutter. Maybe you have to get rid of some stuff. But I don't really enjoy calling nature messy in a negative way. I throw around the word messy all the time when it comes to gardening because I like it. I think I realized this when I was watching someone else's garden tour, and she was walking through her wildlife area. She mostly did like fruits and veggies that she could grow to eat, but she would have this little area of her garden that she would devote to the wildlife. And she would always talk about how, it's so messy right now, and it was funny because what I noticed was I was very drawn to that messy wildlife garden. I was not drawn to the veggie garden nearly as much as I was drawn to this part of her garden that she would always apologize for. And I think we need to stop apologizing for our messy gardens. Because if we're trying to make our garden more natural and we're trying to make it mimic habitat, it might be messy. It might not be messy, but it might be messy, and that's okay. And I think that the reason that messy has gotten this negative connotation is because it goes against a lot of the traditional ways of gardening and a lot of the traditional ways of having land and owning land. So I think that I can appreciate a formal garden But I appreciate a more natural or more wild or more messy garden much, much more. And I think that the reason for this, and maybe this is just speculation on my part, but I think part of the reason why I like a messier, more wild garden is not only for the fact that it provides for the wildlife, if there's enough native plantings in it, of course, and the right kinds of native plantings, but that's beside the point. I think, other than that, I'm also just drawn to the mysteries of a garden and a habitat. And this kind of crossroads, I don't know if crossroads is the right term, but this kind of combination of a human has, cultivated this space, but at the same time they've let, part of it kind of do its own thing. And that is really my strategy. My strategy is I plant and I plant and I plant, and I remove invasives as much as I can, and I just keep planting. I keep planting native plants, and I let them self-seed themselves. I let them sow themselves wherever they want, and if it's in a spot I don't want it, I remove it. And as you can see in this video, one of the ironweeds fell over, and my husband helped me prop it up against the arbor, because dead material is really important for some wildlife, and butterflies even, it's been kind of more recently talked about, butterflies even sometimes land on dead plant material and use it. And so sometimes things that we think are ugly, even though they might be ugly, to us, they might be really important for the wildlife. And I definitely don't think that it's all or nothing. So when I say this, I'm not shaming anybody who does want to make it more tidy. If you like it more formal and more tidy, I say go for it, do it. Clip everything the way that you want it clipped. You can deadhead, I'm not gonna, that's the thing, is I don't want control I don't want us to control each other at all. I want us to do this in the way that we feel is right, and whatever that means to you. And so if you like things to be more formal and a little bit more clipped back, a little bit more clean cut, that is totally up to you. I am just someone who is drawn to a more wild look. But again, I like this collaboration, and that's how I look at it. The way that my strategy goes is I plant and I plant and I plant, and I try to design something, but I also let Mother Nature put her 2 cents in, and I let plants move around as they need to. And a great example of this is blue mistflower. So if you've watched my videos over the past 2 years maybe, you may have seen last year or the year before, blue mistflower was where I put it. Blue mistflower was right where I put it, and it was very fluffy, and it was very full, and it was very lush, and it was very manicured, I guess. I mean, I didn't have to really clip it or anything, but the way it grows, it looked very manicured and more formal, honestly, but full, very full. And this year I realized a lot of those mistflowers that I planted died back. And some of them completely died, is what I'm saying. But I still have a ton of mistflower because it planted itself where it was happier. So it reseeded itself in totally different spots that I didn't even have it in. So that's the thing, is when we think we've put a plant in the right place, sometimes it's not the right place. And sometimes it's just simply because where you live really affects this. So I live on a hill. I talk about this a lot. And I'm in the city. I get that heat island effect. I have a lot of concrete on my property, unfortunately. and it radiates heat. And so when August comes around, it's extra stressful on the plants. And it's because August, in my specific neighborhood, is very, very dry, typically. Now, 2024, this year, August has been a lot better than the years previous, in recent memory. We had a little bit more rain, I think, than last year, but it still wasn't much. So I finally have the experience necessary to realize and recognize that August, it's pretty much going to be dry as a bone. September, it's also probably going to be dry as a bone. Now, I'm recording the audio for this in early September. The video you're watching is early August. So when I'm recording this audio, keep in mind, it's the beginning of September for me, so I have no idea how the rest of this month is going to go. But I can tell you August was pretty dry, except I think it had a little bit more rain than last year in my neighborhood. But basically, in general, I can expect August and September to be very, very dry, and sometimes I supplementally water. Now, I supplementally water new plants. I don't usually water established plants, and sometimes I supplementally water things that I'm like, okay, I thought that where I planted it was a good place, but it gets drier than I thought. Because what's tricky about my area is it will be very, very moist in the winter and spring, and it gives you this false impression that you have moist, well-draining soil, which, as you probably know, moist, well-draining soil is beloved by most of our plants. So when summer rolls around and we get another droughty summer, especially in August and September, I'm just like, okay, clearly this was perfect conditions for most of the year until August and September, and then all of a sudden the plant is very, very sad and very, very unhappy and just struggling. So what I am trying to get at is sometimes you think a plant is in the right spot, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes it needs to go to seed and tell you where it needs to grow. Because sometimes it needs to reseed itself somewhere else, and when you have patchwork soil like I do, where every little section of your soil seems different, like some of it's loamy, some of it's sandy, and some of it's very obviously orange clay, it gets tricky because you could dig in any given square foot and it'd be different soil. But I definitely lean toward planting drought-tolerant plants. And when I want to plant things that need more moisture, I really hone in on the backyard where it can kind of retain more moisture and it gets a little bit more shade. Or I hone in near the cherry tree where, yes, the cherry tree roots are going to, compete for moisture, but there's this perfect little spot where it gets enough shade that it keeps the water from evaporating in that area as quickly. So it kind of, the plants stay a little happier there because they get a little bit of a break from that really brutal sun. So, I definitely, also this video was filmed before I put the new plants in and dug all those weeds out, as you can tell. So if you go back and watch my refreshing an old garden video I just put out a little bit ago, that video is actually more new than this one. So I filmed a little bit out of order, but that's fine. It happens, mistakes happen. But all that to say, don't be upset if your garden is messy like mine. I don't want you to feel shamed. I'm sick of hearing people constantly saying a native plant garden does not have to be messy, because then that kind of implies a negative connotation, and I don't think there needs to be one. I think that if you live in an HOA, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to be neater, tidier, and less quote-unquote messy. Speaking of, here's some butterfly weed, absolutely messy as heck. But I think that if you don't live in an HOA and you don't have neighbors who complain about you, maybe give yourself a little bit more leeway. And if you're into that thing, if you're into that kind of thing, if you like it a little bit more natural, that's my 2 cents on that. I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below, because I just don't like the formal look. I mean, I like formality here and there. Like, my arborvitaes are, they're the shape that they're going to be, right? They're always like this cone shape, which is way more formal than the rest of the plants around here. And I like the occasional topiary. I mean, I don't have a topiary right now, but I think in the future I'd like to have 1 or 2 topiaries just for fun. So I like some formalness here and there, and I definitely like touches of human, like, oh, here's a bench to sit on, here's a chair to sit on, here's a table, here's a little shelf with your pots on it. I like these little touch of human interaction here and there, and I think sometimes they call that cues to care. So I definitely like cues to care. I definitely do think that something's to be said about adding the human flair to things. But all in all, I don't like this negative connotation with messy and native plants. So I think let it be natural. Bye, guys. Do you need a short, quick guide to get started in wildlife gardening? Well, turns out I've got just the thing. I just came out with a new free ebook just for you, and it's called A Wild Approach to Gardening 101. And it's available on my website today at macylou.com/shop. It's free, so go check it out. What do you have to lose? To support the channel, like the video, comment, and subscribe. You can also support my work by buying art from me at macylou.com. Thanks for watching!